Enjoy the taste of summer no matter what the weather when you head to Maverick for some Mountain Dew Baja Blast. You'll love the legendary, refreshing tropical lime flavor. And to make the sweetness last longer, Maverick now has it in 1-liter bottles. For a limited time, get 2 for $5. Single purchase regular price. Plus, Adventure Club members get 25 bonus trail points with purchase. So blast into Maverick today and enjoy that unmistakable Baja flavor. Maverick. Adventure's first stop.
Have you boosted your business with Lenovo Pro yet? Become a Lenovo Pro member for free today and unlock access to Lenovo's exclusive business store for technology, expert advisors, and essential products and services designed just for you. Visit Lenovo.com/Lenovo Pro to sign up for free. That's Lenovo.com/Lenovo Pro. Lenovo. Unlock new AI experiences with Lenovo's ThinkPad X1 Carbon powered by Intel Core Ultra processors.
If you just heard ads and they were political in nature, please shoot me an email. I have excluded all political ads from my show, and if they play, it's because they were mislabeled, possibly intentionally, to try to sneak them through. 'Tis the season for that. The company I work with for my ads, Libsyn, will absolutely take care of it as long as they know there is an issue. Regardless of what you think my politics are, and if you're a longtime listener or you follow my personal social media, you can probably guess. But yes, even ads I agree with should not be playing on my show. I will use my platform to advocate for criminal justice issues, and I do believe that true crime is inherently political because the people who make the laws and, depending on the jurisdiction, the people enforcing them are elected officials. That said, you will only hear those issues in my own voice within the context of an episode. You should not be hearing any political messaging in the form of an advertisement, and if you do, send me an email and I can get the information from you that I need so I can pass that along to the company and they will yank the ad. And if you don't want to hear any ads, political or not, I will shamelessly plug my Patreon, Supercast, and Apple subscription options here. It is $5 a month on any of those platforms, and you will never have to hear any ad on Crimelines again. I'm Charlie Worrell, and I approve this message. Mary Louise Day disappeared in July of 1981. Then in November of 2003, a woman got an ID using her name and her information. Was Mary, presumed to have been murdered, actually alive, or was something else going on? I'm Charlie, and welcome to Crimelines. Hello, and welcome to Crimelines. I have had this case on my radar for a little while now after I saw someone mention it on Reddit. It presented a bit of a challenge for me, though, as far as covering it, because there is only one place where this was covered with any depth, and that's CBS/48 Hours. I love 48 Hours, but I am not a recap show, and I don't generally feel comfortable taking a single source like a documentary or a book and then turning it into a podcast. Even when I cover a case that has a book on it, like next week's case, I do all of the newspaper archival and trial research before I even crack open the book, because I don't want to be taking someone else's work as a whole and repackaging it as my own. But I did my usual research on this case and came up entirely empty-handed. There was absolutely nothing that I could find in the newspaper archives I have access to, and the majority of the internet reporting on this case that I found is using 48 Hours and other CBS News coverage, sometimes without credit, as their only source. But I really wanted to talk about this case because I think it's one that challenges our thinking and our assumptions. And that makes it an important thing to talk about. So, with all credit to CBS News for the information, I'm going to break my own rule about using limited sources, and I'm going to cover it anyway. We are going to start with Mary Louise Day, who was born in February of 1968 in Little Falls, New York, which is about an hour west of Albany. I actually know where this little town is because I used to go to family reunions about a half an hour from there near the Orisville Shrine. Anyway, Mary was Charlotte and Charles Day's first daughter, but she wouldn't be an only child for very long. In the next 3 years, Mary was joined by her sister Kathy and then her sister Sherry. Basically, 3 little girls born in just about as many years. Being so close in age made them each other's first best friend, but unfortunately, the home they were growing up in was not stable. At one point, all 3 were removed from the home and placed in foster care due to the allegations of neglect against their parents. While they were in care, Charlotte and Charles divorced, and then Charlotte remarried a man named William Hoole. They would have 2 more children together. One of them was born while Charlotte's 3 daughters remained in foster care. In 1976, Charlotte had shown that she could provide a stable home, and she was able to get custody of the older 2 girls back. So Mary and Kathy went home with their mother and their new stepfather and their new sibling, but Sherry did not. She was 6 at the time, and their foster family adopted her. It is not clear to me why this decision was made for Sherry to remain with the foster parents while the others went back. William Hoole was in the Army. He had enlisted shortly after he and Charlotte married, and that meant they moved around. They went from New York to Georgia, and then in 1978, they moved to Hawaii, taking Mary and Kathy with them. They were barely settled in their new home in Hawaii when they got word that the girls' father, Charles Day, had died. He left behind an inheritance for them that they could collect at 18, and Kathy and Mary were acutely aware of this money. Life with their stepfather, William, was terrible, and there are credible accusations against him of physical abuse. So that money at 18 meant freedom. It meant they would be able to leave the house as soon as they got access to it and move on with their lives. Kathy and Mary even came up with a code word they would use when they were discussing their inheritance so that no one would know what they were talking about, and that code word was Mohawk, which was probably a nod to their hometown. Being familiar with that area, I know it is the Mohawk Nation's ancestral homeland, and there are a lot of things, including the Mohawk River, named for that. So my guess is they came up with this word because it referred back to upstate New York. So these 2 girls were really hanging on to the hope that that money represented for them. But it didn't make the home any less abusive. And in December of 1980, the authorities in Hawaii learned about the physical abuse towards 12-year-old Mary. And once again, she was removed from her mother's care and placed into protective custody. A month later, William got transferred to Fort Ord, which is on the coast of California. So the family packed up the children they still had custody of, again, and the Army moved them to Seaside, California, which left Mary in care in Hawaii with no family around. This was not unlike what happened to her sister Sherry, but Sherry had been left in an adoptive home. Mary was still in temporary placement. And I cannot imagine this was easy on her. But she was returned to her mother's care after a few months, and she was moved out to California to be with the family. But it doesn't sound like anything really changed. At some point in mid-July 1981, the family went out to dinner. Well, Charlotte, William, and their 2 children together went out to dinner. They left Mary and Kathy at home, and there hasn't been a reason given for why these 2 were left at home, but the fact that William took his biological children with him is giving me a hint that there was a division in this home between her kids and his kids. While they were gone, William's dog started acting very sick, lying on the kitchen floor and really looking on the brink of death. There were no cell phones at the time, so it's not like the girls could call and tell their parents something was wrong. They just had to sit there with this very sick dog and wait for them to come home. But it was not a relief for the girls when Charlotte and William got home, because William flipped out when he saw how sick the dog was. For some reason known only to him, he blamed 13-year-old Mary, and he accused her of poisoning his dog. His yelling escalated to physical violence, and he beat Mary while her siblings could hear her screaming. but they were too young and too small to intervene. Kathy said she saw Mary with blood coming from her mouth. And I see absolutely no report that Charlotte attempted to do anything for her daughter. As Kathy remembered it, when she got up the next morning, Mary just wasn't there. Kathy asked her mom, "Where's Mary?" And Charlotte said that Mary ran away. She would not give Kathy any more information and made it clear to Kathy that she was just not to ask about this again. It wasn't long before Mary's things had been packed up, her pictures removed, and no one was allowed to mention her again. Shortly after Mary disappeared, the family moved to another house in the area, and then about 2 years later, they moved back to New York. Sherry, who had been with her adoptive family for around 6 or 7 years at this point, was able to now visit her birth family and see her sisters again. She was immediately confused because she knew she had 2 older sisters, not just one. So she asked where Mary was, and she was told she had run away. In bed one night when she was sleeping over, she asked Kathy what happened to Mary, and Kathy shushed her and said Mary ran away at least 2 years before to live on the street, and that they were not allowed to talk about her anymore. And that's pretty much the story that was given for years. It's all Charlotte would say. Mary ran away, and they looked for her, but they couldn't find her. We know that's not true, the part about looking for her, because Charlotte herself said so years later. She said that Mary had run away so many times that she couldn't even count, and she compared the situation to getting a night crawler out of a wormhole. You grab them and you have them, but soon enough, they're gone again. She said that William told her at some point that they filed a missing persons report, but she does not remember that happening. When Sherry was an adult, she decided to look into where Mary went. She started by asking Charlotte for more information, but Charlotte seemed completely unconcerned with Mary's whereabouts or her well-being. But as Sherry kept pressing Charlotte with questions, Charlotte made a weird comment about how there were so many places in California where someone could hide a body and it would never be found. In 1992, unable to find her runaway sister after over a decade and starting to believe that Mary may have been killed, Sherry decided to report Mary missing to the Fort Ord Military Base Police. Sherry was told that they did a record search for any signs of Mary Louise Day out there, someone using her birth date and her information, but they found nothing. So that means they couldn't find any work records, driver's license, or anything like that. It doesn't seem like anything else was done at this point, and this could have been a matter of bad timing. When Fort Ord first came up in this case, I decided to look it up because that's what I do, and realized this base has been closed. And the Base Realignment and Closure Commission had suggested in 1991 that they close the base and move the units to Fort Lewis in Washington. Now, this process took years, finally closing in 1994. So in 1992, as they're learning that they're having to start closing down this base, I imagine investigating a runaway case of a 13-year-old from 11 years earlier was low on the priority list as they were transferring cold cases to the city police. Sherry was patient, though. She tried to give time for things to happen, but then they didn't. In 1999, she was able to get in touch with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and they released an age progression photo. I have not been able to find any media coverage of this in the newspaper archives, newspapers.com, of course, or by using the Wayback Machine, but usually the release of age progressions help get at least some local coverage, so there may have been some that just hasn't been archived. In 2002, the Seaside Police, which had taken all of the old Fort Ord cases, started doing a cold case review over what they had, and Mary Day's case was one that they pulled. At this point, it was a 20-year-old missing child case. The hope was that if Mary was a runaway, they would find her pretty quickly. This is just short of social media becoming a thing, but lots of records were digitized and much easier to search. So looking at marriage licenses, driver's license, social security numbers being pinged for work, enlistment in the military, it would be pretty easy to find in 2002, much easier than in 1992. But they still could find no evidence of Mary after 1981 when she was returned to her mother's care. That's actually the last official documentation of Mary existing. There was no record that she had been enrolled in school. It's possible she went to California so late in the school year that they decided not to enroll her and just wait to the fall. But the neighbors who were still in the area remembered William and Charlotte, but they didn't really know anything about them, and they did not remember Mary at all. So that makes me ask the question, if she ran away, where did she go? She had no friends in California. So the investigators in Seaside were definitely seeing this as suspicious, and they took Kathy to their old home in March of 2003 to walk through what happened. Kathy told them about the attack on Mary over the sick dog and then pointed out a section of the backyard where she and her younger siblings were told not to go near. So the police brought cadaver dogs into the backyard, and independently, the dogs all indicated on the same spot near a tree. They dug in that spot and they found a girl's shoe, but then they kept going and found nothing else. However, we have 4 dogs indicating on the same spot, so the police wondered if it was a possibility that the remains had been there, but then were later moved. The police then sat down with Charlotte and William the following month. They were living in Riley County, Kansas at the time, and both agreed to sit down with police and talk about Mary. CBS News put some of Charlotte's interview online, so I'm going to go ahead and play some of it now. I cleaned it up, so hopefully it's clearer than the raw audio was, but I want you to hear it because it's one of those cases where you have to hear what she said and how she said it. Just a quick note that when she mentions Billy, she's talking about her daughter with William.
You know, life is full of regrets. If you go back and say, you know, if I did this and this and this.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Okay. So this is my problem. I didn't do a lot of things I should have, and I didn't do a lot of things I could have and would have. Now I'm stuck with consequences.
Okay.
I was married before. Mary and Kathy are my children, so you know who I'm talking about. Billie Jean and William are the children from this marriage, so I have Mary, Kathy, Billie Jean, and William.
You talk to them often?
I wouldn't talk to either one right now.
Okay.
Because Kathy just got Billie Jean so brainwashed. When Billie Jean calls, the only thing she wants to do is, why don't you find Mary? Where is she? What did you do to her? Blah, blah, blah. And she got her father so upset. She got me so upset.
So, when's the last time you heard from Mary?
81. Last time she ran.
She remember what you haven't heard from her since?
No.
Did you guys take in cash stuff to find her?
We should have. We should have.
But you didn't?
I don't think we did.
Took a reason why?
My husband seems to think we called the police, but there was never follow-up.
Okay.
You know, they hear the story of the people that fall through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what happened to her.
You know, we all look back, just like you said, and made mistakes back then.
When I look back, and what I should have done, I really should have checked back and seen what happened to Mary. I don't know. I don't know why I didn't.
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious why they were suspicious. She talked about her younger daughter, Billy, wanting to know what happened to Mary and followed it up with the phrase, blah, blah, blah. She referenced having regrets, but she still stuck to the story that Mary had run away.
When you're in winter's favorite town, the snow-covered mountains surround you. A historic Main Street charms you. And every day brings a new adventure. Welcome to Park City, Utah. Naturally, winter's favorite town. Join the experience at visitparkcity.com.
Have you boosted your business with Lenovo Pro yet? Become a Lenovo Pro member for free today and unlock access to Lenovo's exclusive business store for technology, expert advisors, and essential products and services designed just for you. Visit Lenovo.com/Lenovo Pro to sign up for free. That's Lenovo.com/Lenovo Pro. Lenovo. Unlock new AI experiences with Lenovo's ThinkPad X1 Carbon, powered by Intel Core Ultra processors.
William also stuck to the running away story. He said that he realized Mary was gone when he went to check on the kids who were all supposed to still be in their beds, and when he told Charlotte that Mary had run away, Charlotte got so upset that they had to call the police. But Charlotte, as we just heard, told the investigators that William said they called the police, but she didn't remember it. If she was the one who was so upset, you'd think she'd remember this. But the investigators had another question for William. Why would he or Charlotte get that upset and panic over Mary not being there when, according to Charlotte, she ran away all the time? And William didn't really have an answer for this. So the detective backed up the timeline to several hours before Mary was discovered missing and asked about the sick dog that Kathy mentioned. William said that Mary had poisoned his dog, and he was really angry about it. Mary made a run for the door to take off, and he grabbed her. She was trying to fight him off however she could, swinging her arms, trying to kick him, and he admitted that he both pushed her and hit her. He was asked how he hit Mary, and he showed an open hand where the palm or the butt of his hand is stuck out a bit and his fingers are a little bent. The investigator described it to 48 Hours as a martial arts move, and he said he hit her like that in the chest. Now, they said, well, chest, the upper chest, could it possibly have been her neck? And he seemed to concede it could have been. William was asked what his anger level was that night on a scale of 1 to 10, and William said he was at a 15. The investigators were feeling like they were getting closer to a confession. He admitted that he was beyond furious. He admitted that he hit her. So they pushed and said, "You're this angry? Maybe you killed her." William said no, he didn't kill her, but he said Charlotte told him the next morning that it was like he was possessed with a demon the night before. So William denied killing her, but this also felt like a step closer to a confession. Was William saying that he didn't kill her, but this demon did? And he wouldn't commit to that being a possibility either. He basically said his body was capable of killing her that night, but that he didn't do it. The investigators believe they were so close to a confession here, so close, but just not there. And they had to take a hard look at their case and decide if they had enough to move forward. It didn't seem like they did unless they either got an actual full confession from William or they could find Mary Day's body. Before they got either of those things, about 7 months after interrogating their person of interest, William Hoole, a woman using Mary Louise Day's identity was found in Arizona. It was November of 2003, and the police in Phoenix, Arizona pulled over a couple who was driving a truck that had a stolen license plate. They took the IDs from both the man and the woman and ran them. They got a hit on the woman's ID because Mary Day was a missing person out of California. The ID this woman handed over was very recently issued, like days before the truck was pulled over. It seemed strange that there was no ID or any sign of Mary Day for 20 years, and then less than a year after the cold case review started, a woman went and got an ID with Mary Day's name and date of birth. The investigators were not convinced that this Phoenix Mary was going to be the Mary Day they were looking for, so they pulled her picture from her ID. I'm going to put the photos side by side, the Phoenix Mary photo and a known photo of Mary Day on my website. And I'll go ahead and leave the link in the show notes because you need to see this for yourself. You know those people who have the same face from birth through adulthood? If Mary Day was one of those people, she would look like Phoenix Mary. Phoenix Mary looked more like Mary's picture from when she was 12 years old than she looked like the age progression. The same downturned eyes, a slight asymmetry to her nose. You have to look at the pictures and you'll see what I mean. But the investigators were still not convinced. Was it possible that this woman learned about the missing case somehow? realized she resembled the missing person, and then decided to steal her identity. Two of the most well-known living doe cases that I can think of are Joseph Newton Chandler and Lori Erica Ruff, and they both did that. The original Joseph Newton Chandler was an 8-year-old boy who died in a car wreck, and this guy stole his identity. And Lori Erica Ruff initially took the identity of Betty Sue Turner, who had died in a house fire at the age of 2. So this was a possibility, and when the investigators tracked down Phoenix Mary, she insisted she really was Mary Louise Day. She said she had run away from her mother Charlotte and her stepfather William due to the physical abuse in the home. Phoenix Mary said that William did more than just push and hit her like he claimed. He was banging her head into things like the tub and the table, and she even thinks she blacked out at some point that night. He was brutal. She did not really want to open up much to the police about what her life was like before or after this, because she had some really bad memories, including that final night living with her family. And this Mary also couldn't remember everything. Like, she couldn't remember what set William off the night she left the house, and she couldn't remember the names of some family members. She either didn't know about or had forgotten about the inheritance from Charles Day, which also meant she didn't remember the code word that she and Kathy used when they talked about it. That money was their way out of the situation, and they talked about it often enough that Kathy couldn't really believe she didn't remember it. The trauma of Mary's life could be a reason to have blocked out these things and to not want to talk about them. Additionally, she had been using alcohol and illicit substances since she was a teenager, and that can leave gaps in her memory. But the investigators had to consider the possibility that Phoenix Mary didn't talk more because she couldn't. She didn't know more than what she said because she wasn't really Mary Day. It wasn't just the holes in her memory that were an issue, but also the massive hole in the record. She had nothing backing up that she used the name Mary Day at any point from 1981 until 2003 when she got that ID. No one in her life called her Mary. She had been living under the name Monica Devereaux, same initials, but not the same name. As Phoenix Mary was being interviewed and asked questions again and again, she started to get frustrated about being quizzed to prove who she was. If you remember, she was just living her life, and then she got pulled over. She didn't ask for any of this, and from her point of view, she told them what she knew, and it should have been case closed. In one phone call with the investigator, she finally asked, "If you found me as a dead body, how would you know it's me?" This was 2003, so the answer was what it would be today, DNA. So she wanted a DNA test to settle it. They didn't have the DNA from Mary Day, but they did have her mother, who was still alive. So it wouldn't be a direct comparison, but we've seen them do DNA matches through maternity and or paternity tests so many times. When the results came back, to the surprise of everyone except Mary Day, that is, she was who she said she was. She was Charlotte's daughter. In July of 1981, when Mary Louise Day was 13, her stepfather beat her for the last time. She left home and didn't look back. For the investigators, the DNA match was case closed, and her sister Sherry invited Mary to come to North Carolina to live with her. But after she moved in, things didn't really go well. The longer Mary was there, the less Sherry thought she was her sister. Sherry's first question was where Mary's accent came from. She grew up mostly in New York, but she spent time in Hawaii, California, and we know Arizona. But she had an accent that's been described as Southern. But it also doesn't sound entirely natural. The detective had made a note about her strange accent that he couldn't quite place, and I'm going to go ahead and play clips of it now. Again, these come from 48 Hours. There's a little music playing under it. Please don't sue me, 48 Hours. I'm just playing a little clip of the episode from the police recordings.
That's an interesting dialect you have, Mary.
Would you mind
I don't know if I've ever quite heard that particular manner of speaking.
So y'all still trying to prove who I am, huh?
Yes, ma'am, we are.
See, nobody knows me as Murray. I gave that name up years ago.
What name would they know you by?
Monica Devereaux.
So Sherry noticed that accent, and it didn't sound like anything she had really heard before. And it certainly didn't sound like someone who hadn't grown up in the South, or at least in the Southern Midwest. In her childhood, Mary had very briefly lived in Georgia when her stepdad was stationed there, but not really long enough to pick up an accent like this. Sherry also noticed that magazines were coming to Mary in her other name, Monica, and Mary's stories just didn't always make sense. And when Sherry would ask for more information, Mary would then contradict herself. She wouldn't answer the same question quite the same way twice. So it's not even like Sherry could try to piece together her own timeline to get a clear picture. Eventually, Mary's clear mental health issues were hard for Sherry to manage in a home with small children, and Mary's drinking certainly didn't help. We do have to remember that Mary was a child who was neglected, abused, and in and out of foster care until the age of 13. And then after that, she was living on the fringes as a runaway and someone without the backing most people have when they start adulthood. So Mary wasn't coming into Sherry's house with a clean slate. She was bringing a lot with her. So Mary moved out and she went back to Arizona. She met a man who she married, and the two eventually settled down in Missouri. In the meantime, in 2008, the lead investigator on the now closed Mary Day case got a phone call. There were some cadaver dogs out by the old Fort Ord Army base on an assignment, and they led the police through an entire neighborhood to one house where they indicated. Looking up who had previously lived at the house, they saw the names William and Charlotte Houle. This was the house they moved to after Mary disappeared. So we have 4 cadavered dogs indicating in the backyard of the house the family lived at when Mary went missing, and then other dogs indicating at their next house. So what were the odds? This case was officially closed. This wasn't something they could dedicate resources to when they had DNA identifying Mary Day as alive. So a retired detective came in to look at the case again and give his thoughts. And he walked away believing that Mary Day had been murdered by her stepfather and was left in the backyard. Her body was then moved to the new house, and then, before the family left the state, they moved her body again to somewhere no one would find it, in a place, like Charlotte told Sherry, were all over California. He said the shoe was key for him, as it matched the type of shoe Kathy said that she and Mary usually wore. Soil samples were tested, and they were consistent with there having been human decomposition. But if Mary Day had been dead since 1981, who was Monica Devereaux, who was claiming to be Mary Day? The DNA test proved she was a daughter of Charlotte Houle. And the independent investigator believed that was true. She was a daughter of Charlotte's, just one the family had not met before. He believed, after looking into Charlotte's past, that she may have had a child or even children who she placed for adoption. Like she did with Sherry, she may have kept in contact with the child or possibly reconnected when she was an adult. Consulting with an expert on regional accents, they determined that the Phoenix Mary's accent indicated a child raised in the South until they were at least the age of 9 or 10, and that accounted for Monica's distinct accent. So Charlotte has this secret daughter who grew up in the South, and after William and Charlotte found out they were being investigated for Mary's murder 20 years later, they convinced this woman to pose as Mary and get the ID in that name using Mary's documents. Why would she agree to something like that? The answer was money. No one reported Mary missing, and she had never been declared dead, so her inheritance from her father just sat there collecting interest. It was worth around $60,000 according to 48 Hours. so Monica could collect that money if she posed as Mary. There was also an email that Phoenix Mary / Monica sent to one of the investigators at some point where she said she lied about who she was. She never made any admissions beyond that, and there was a follow-up email where she walked it back, saying she wasn't quite sure what she was trying to say in her previous email, but it seemed pretty clear, at least to this investigator, that she meant what she said. She had lied.
When you're in winter's favorite town, the snow-covered mountains surround you. A historic Main Street charms you. And every day brings a new adventure. Welcome to Park City, Utah. Naturally, winter's favorite town. Join the experience at visitparkcity.com.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? The things you know make you feel better even when it's impossible to make time for them. Like that workout you try to squeeze in between kids' activities, work, and everything else you have going on, and before you know it, it gets pushed to tomorrow. Sound familiar? But it's the moments when you feel like you have no time for yourself when those non-negotiables are more important than ever. Those are the things that keep you strong, healthy, motivated, and prepared to take on everything life demands of you. So why not make therapy one of them? BetterHelp Online Therapy makes it easy to get started with affordable phone, video, or live chat sessions you can do from anywhere. And the option to message your therapist between sessions if anything comes up. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com.
So that's one theory of what happened here, that the imposter was a biological child of Charlotte, just not Mary. The other theory is that she was Mary Day, and there were other explanations for these inconsistencies. For one, Charlotte had a motivating reason to not report that Mary wasn't living with her any longer, other than that she had been murdered. She was collecting Social Security death benefits for Mary and Kathy since the death of their father. If Mary wasn't in the home, Charlotte wouldn't get those checks, and she cashed Mary's check every month until Mary aged out from getting them. And like I said, Mary had a rough life before and after living with her family with clear mental health issues. One of the ways trauma affects the memory is with episodic memory, which is the ability to retell events in the right order. That is the way it's been described. Mary told stories in a rambling way that was hard to follow and with contradictory details. It sounds exactly like someone who has a poor episodic memory. Now compound that with repeated and ongoing trauma and substance abuse. I just can't imagine how hard this was, though, for Mary's sisters to have this woman who might be her back in their lives, alive, not entirely well, but alive and functioning as an adult, but then also have this doubt that maybe their sister had been murdered and now no justice will come because they don't have a resolution on what really happened. And then in 2017, it really seemed that time was of the essence to settle this once and for all because Mary was terminally ill with cancer. The new acting police chief in Seaside decided to go ahead and take another hard look at the case. One of the first things she did was run another DNA test. The first test was a simple maternity test since they were only looking for the relationship to Charlotte, and her father, Charles, was dead. With the new test, they were able to look at the paternal side as well. I assume they did this by comparing her DNA to her full sister's and possibly other relatives of Charles. Whatever they did, it showed that she was the child of both Charles and Charlotte. That didn't completely disprove that Charlotte placed a child for adoption, but it seemed odd that no one would have known about an earlier pregnancy of theirs when they went on to have 3 children in quick succession. Another issue the chief saw with the case was the shoe that had been uncovered from the backyard. It was in that spot where the cadaver dogs had indicated. It was seen as evidence that Mary may have been buried there. But this shoe was not a teenager's shoe. Based on the photograph I saw, it looks like the sole is 20 centimeters. Using a conversion chart, this would make it a child size 1, something a 6, 7, 8-year-old would typically wear. This was a little girl's shoe, not a 13-year-old's. So the police chief went to visit Mary and interview her, and this time Mary seemed more willing to speak. It had been 14 years since she had been found, so she may have been more trusting of the police at this point in her life, or at least this police chief who was a woman. She may have just been more comfortable, but it's also likely she just wanted this put to rest before she died. Regardless of what contributed to Mary's clearer mind and willingness to talk, she did tell more of her story. She said that after she ran away from home, she quickly changed her name so that she wouldn't get sent back. After all, that's what had happened before. Even when she told the authorities she was being abused, they kept her for a few months and then sent her right back. The only way to stay free and clear was to fly under the radar. Then Mary said something she had never told them before. There was someone who could verify her story. At some point after she ran away, around the age of 15, a woman named Maury Kimball took her in. She stayed with her for about a year before she ran away again. Mary then lived the way most teen runaways do, on the fringes of society and vulnerable to all of the things that come with that. She managed to scrape by, to survive, like this until she was about 33 years old. Mary needed her gallbladder removed, but she couldn't afford the surgery, so she decided to do something she hadn't done in all of this time. She was going to apply for state assistance. To get on Medicaid to pay for the surgery, she needed a legal ID in her legal name. Legal IDs can be such a barrier for people because you need money and know-how to request your birth certificate, particularly if you are living in Arizona and you were born in New York. Thankfully, Arizona, like a lot of places, does have nonprofits who specifically help people get what they need to then get a legal ID, which is what Mary did. She went through this nonprofit and they helped her request her birth certificate. So she went and got a state ID. And that is how and why Mary Day emerged during her own homicide investigation. Charlotte had not been in touch with her. She just needed her documents, and the timing was a coincidence. 9 days after Mary Day's final interview with police, she died of cancer at the age of 49. Though Mary was dead, they had this information they could use to now vet more of her story, which included reaching out to Maury. Maury is what we would call an angel on earth. She was a loving woman with a big heart, and she confirmed that she had taken Mary in the early to mid-1980s. She had 2 little kids of her own who adored Mary, and Maury wanted to help this girl who seemed just too innocent and too naive for the streets. She just wanted to keep her safe. So Maury had Mary live with her for about a year, and Mary could have stayed longer. She could have stayed as long as she needed to. But Maury woke up one day, and she was gone. After Maury spoke with the police and learned more about Mary, she told some of her extended family about it, and they went through their old photos from the 1980s. And one of them found a picture of Mary from that year she lived with Maury. The photo was compared to a known photo of Mary from before she ran away, and 48 Hours had a hand in this portion of the investigation because they reached out to a facial recognition company. This was 2017, so the technology was definitely there, and by comparing the photo that Maury provided and the last photo of Mary before she ran away, they found that it was a 99% probability that this was the same person. This photo that Maury's family member had was the proof they needed that Mary Day was alive after she left her home, and it was the link between the Mary Day of 1981 and the Mary Day who reappeared in 2003. There are some things in this case that are still unexplained, like the cadaver dogs hitting on a spot in 2 different backyards where they lived. And I don't know that we will ever have an answer to what happened there. But in the case of what happened to Mary Day, we do have an answer, but it leaves us with some very important lessons. We have to be careful when we make assumptions in a case, or we put too much weight into evidence without thinking more critically about it. Like the shoe found in the backyard that turned out would have been too small to have been Mary's. We have to remember that people can be abusive, they can be unloving, they can be unkind, they can not have very many redeeming qualities in our eyes and still not have killed anyone. And we have to accept that sometimes not everything is going to fit in a case. There will be things that stick out as still being suspicious, which, believe me, I see it too. But that doesn't make the solution wrong. Sometimes we're the ones who are wrong. And as we listen to particularly unsolved true crime cases, and as we discuss them, we need to keep our minds open to all possible solutions. We need to be open to the idea that our theory may be wrong. And that's for 2 very important reasons. 1, so we don't miss the answer that's right in front of us. And 2, that we don't implicate innocent, or at least innocent of murder people, in a crime they didn't commit. It makes me think of the Corinne Rainey case where her husband sued and won for defamation for being portrayed as guilty when he was found not guilty. You can harbor your suspicions in that case, but there is a line between harboring suspicions and accusing someone of murder. And I think to take an ethical approach to true crime requires us to always look for that line. Thank you for listening. If you want more content, check out my other show, Crimelines and Consequences, wherever you get your podcasts. I also offer bonus content and ad-free listening at patreon.com/crimelines or through the Apple Podcast app. If you want to buy me a coffee, the official drink of Crimelines, you can give a one-time donation at basement4productions.com/support.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? The things you know make you feel better even when it's impossible to make time for them. Like that workout you try to squeeze in between kids' activities, work, and everything else you have going on, and before you know it, it gets pushed to tomorrow. Sound familiar? But it's the moments when you feel like you have no time for yourself when those non-negotiables are more important than ever. Those are the things that keep you strong, healthy, motivated, and prepared to take on everything life demands of you. So why not make therapy one of them? BetterHelp Online Therapy makes it easy to get started with affordable phone, video, or live chat sessions you can do from anywhere, and the option to message your therapist between sessions if anything comes up. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com.